What's the most savage thing you've accidentally said in the heat of the moment? Story 1. This one had a little setup, but I think it's funny enough to share. At a family vacation, my grandmother was giving me grief for not remembering her birthday. I've never been good with birthdays. After telling me it was the password to her iPhone, she wanted me to take a picture with it, which is why I needed the password. While she was distracted, I opened up the settings, changed her password to my birth date, and then set her phone down. Cue 15 minutes later, she's trying to get into her phone and it's not working. Suspecting mischief, she grumpily asks me if I've changed the password to her phone in front of our entire family. I admit that I did. Well, what is it? She asked impatiently. It's my birthday. She sat there in stunned silence for about 15 seconds, not being able to remember my birthday before our family exploded laughing. Was a good time. Story 2. About 25 years ago, I was in grade 9 and my parents bought me a pair of Air Maxes. I'm a female, but I had picked a pair of Air Maxes that was supposed to be for males because I preferred the color of the shoes. I was super pumped to get those shoes. We didn't have lots of money and it was a pretty extravagant purchase. Anyway, I was at our local shopping center and I ran into a group of guys I went to high school with. They were a real bunch of holes that thrived on dumping on other people. One of the guys had on the same pair of shoes and said to me, "Do you know you're wearing men's shoes?" To which I quickly replied, "Then why the are you wearing them?" The other guys pissed themselves laughing and it still stands out in my mind after all these years. Story 3. This was back in my junior year of college. At the beginning of the semester, I was introducing myself to my very intimidating biochemistry professor. The guy was a genius, but also a hard ass. Students were all terrified to ask him questions because he was known for grilling people, and if they hadn't made enough effort beforehand, he'd send them out of his office to learn on their own. As I walked into his office, he was sorting through some boxes and made a really sarcastic comment regarding stuffing me in the box and shipping it off somewhere. He looked up, and for my response, I just blurted out without thinking, "I wouldn't mind going somewhere nice." Dude laughed so hard that it actually startled me a little. We got along pretty well for the remainder of the semester, so it all worked out really well. It's amazing what a little laughter can do to ease tension. Story 4. At work at a company meeting, someone was presenting something cool they volunteered to work on and finish. They then explained things they thought they could do better in a self-deprecating way, and a bunch of other people started railing against his work with petty criticism. It was definitely good work though, and a thought just hit me, so I blurted it out. Sometimes done is the best feature. A bunch of people laughed and then the criticism stopped. People gave him kudos and we moved on. Not really bad, but I was surprised this thought somehow came out fully formed like it was some phrase I've been saying for decades. I guess I was just realizing how many people don't finish anything they start, so done suddenly seemed like a pretty damn good feature. Give the man some credit for finishing the damn thing. Story 5. At work, when in a somewhat heated discussion of why things kept going wrong at a small company, upper management said something to the effect of, "Why does XYZ keep happening? It's idiot-proof." And I replied, "We need to stop hiring new idiots to test if that's true." The context was, please stop trying to find people to actually test if it's idiot-proof. Please hire someone who is not a bigger idiot than the previous hire that was let go for being an idiot. First, I work in a very small company and all of us are close enough outside of work that this wouldn't get me fired or reprimanded or anything. Second, my point was that we should hire smarter people instead of any Joe that applied, and then the procedure would be idiot-proof. We just needed a slightly smarter idiot. Thirdly, the Douglas Adams quote is what I had in mind when I said it, but I couldn't remember at the time where I had heard it from. Thankfully, I remembered it eventually. Story 6. I was a lawyer in this criminal case arising out of the Standing Rock events. That morning, some Lakota people had given us this traditional blessing to wish us well for the trial, and 5 to 7 activists were sitting in the courtroom to watch and support us. It happened that there was a certain digital document that I needed before the jury got back from a break, and we didn't know just when the break would be over. I remember turning to the supporters, holding up a thumb drive and telling them exactly what I needed from the office across the street and how to get it. I held out the thumb drive and with all the intensity of an ancient general sending his troops into battle said, "Fastest runner, go now." This tiny little young woman grabbed the thumb drive and hauled ass. She got back before the jury returned. Story 7. I don't know about badass, but years ago I worked at a Hard Rock cafe and we often had pre-shift server meetings outdoors on a patio. And while my boss was droning on about selling us more overpriced plastic cups, I was staring off at the spinning globe on top of the building that says, "Save the planet" on it. I interrupted my boss by blurting out, "If Hard Rock is trying to save the planet, why do we waste so much paper?" Which was really directed at my managers who had a hard on for printing out stupid memos. They somehow didn't realize it was about them specifically and passed the comment up the food chain, which ended up resulting into the entire company changing their payroll system to paperless globally. As a reward, I was given a pin shaped like a light bulb that said "Bright Idea" on it. Story 8. When I was a broke college student, a wealthy older lawyer hit my car. No damage to his, but mine was crumpled and I spent all of my no money at the time keeping it on the road. I was going literally 7 miles per hour in a parking lot and he was entirely at fault. We exchanged insurance info and I had to get a rental car until mine was fixed. He dodged the insurance calls for about 2 weeks, forcing me to pay out of pocket for the rental, about $600 of which I definitely didn't have. I knew this guy was an asshole, snooty lawyer. My dad is a court attorney, and while I have never used this flex, I finally had to ask my dad to call him and talk to some lawyer. 15 minutes later, I get a call and insurance will go forward. Fast forward like 8 years, and I'm bartending at a swanky lounge where a Chamber of Commerce event is going on, just for local business people to rub elbows and network. This lawyer douche is really feeling himself and charming the room. He orders a glass of wine from me and then stops and says, "Hey, miss, do I know you?" So I came back loudly with, "Well, not really, but you hit my car in a parking lot a few years ago when I was a broke college student and stuck me with the bill. Do you want to open a tab for the wine or close out now?" He didn't open a tab. Another story back somewhere around 2005, I went to see a band play and 30 Seconds to Mars was opening for them. Jared Leto was in that band and at the time Lindsay Lohan was dating him. I live not far from where she grew up, and just a few days ago, a friend told me that Lindsay acted like an enormously entitled bitch towards her a few days ago when they were walking their dogs, something about refusing autographs that no one asked for. We got right up to the front during their set. OMG, they were so bad, so we could be in place for the next band. Right behind the barrier was Lindsay watching the set. I motioned her over and asked her to take a photo. She starts yelling, "OMG, I'm just a normal person trying to watch my boyfriend. Leave me alone." Exactly the reaction I was hoping for. I put on my best innocent, confused face and said, "I just wanted a pic with my boyfriend since we made it to the front row," and then said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were someone famous or something." She went backstage after that. Honestly, I'd never felt so cool. Story 9. I was crazy about this one dude. He was intelligent and hot and funny and a bit older. After a few weeks of dating, he said he wasn't ready for a commitment. I told him to come pick up his book from my place and not to reach out again as it hurt too much. I was like that into him. So he comes to my apartment, I go to hand him the book and begin to shut the door. He puts his foot in the way to stop it and says, "I don't know what to do. I'm not ready, but I can't stop thinking about you." Moving my hand off the door, I handed him the book anyway and said, "Then pick me up at 7. Anyways, now we're married. Story 10. A long time ago, I was walking down a side street in a medium-sized town with my girlfriend. A car was parked ahead with the front of the car facing us as we approached. I could see 2 kids, maybe in their late teens, and instantly could tell they were likely going to say something as my girlfriend was rather attractive. As soon as we came up next to them, I hear, "Hey baby, ditch the zero and come hang with the hero." I could feel my blood boil, but I kept my cool and calmly said, "Sorry buddy, I'm not gay and don't call my girlfriend a zero." The dude's friends started laughing at him and my girlfriend made a sarcastic crying face and we both started to laugh. Story 11. At a party a few years back, someone stole my friend's purse. Her boyfriend found the guy who took it and got it back for her, but he was still in an angry, drunken rage and was continuing to escalate the situation when he was well outnumbered. My friend finds me and says, "I'm afraid my boyfriend is about to get into a fight. I need your help. Stop him, please." I stand up and I tell her, "I can't promise you I can't stop him from fighting, but I can promise you I won't let him lose," before walking off to find him. Ultimately, no fight actually broke out, and I didn't realize that I had basically said a cheesy one-liner until after the fact when my friend told me how intense that line actually was. I didn't mean for it to sound so dramatic. I just wanted to let her know I wouldn't let him get his ass kicked. I didn't mean to make it sound like I was about to demolish 3 guys by myself like I'm some sort of action hero. Story 12. In a class at university, each student had to give a presentation about a scientific paper and answer questions about it. We were told to ask the speaker questions because otherwise the professor would, and his questions would obviously be harder. That professor was really brutal in his critiques of the presentations, but also fair and accurate. In any case, I asked a question after every single presentation, but when my turn came, no student wanted to ask anything, so the professor asked me if I wanted to ask myself a question. Without even thinking about it, I said, "Say, how come your presentation was so extremely excellent?" I was mentally preparing to be chewed out, but instead, the professor needed a minute to stop laughing and then gave me the best grade possible. Story 13. I actually said nothing. I was on my motorcycle in traffic on a wet overpass with short Jersey walls. The guy behind me was driving a bit too fast and slammed on his brakes, sliding into me, but no damage as he was going slow enough to touch and push me about 5 feet before finally coming to a stop. The angle had me going straight forward, so I didn't fall. Had it been much faster, I would have been thrown over the hedge to my death, so obviously, I was not happy. I turned off the engine, got off the bike, and slowly walked over to the driver that hit me. It's only a few feet away, and when he saw me coming towards him, he furiously started raising his manual window, so I could just see him struggling to pump the winder. When I got there, I just knocked on his window, pointed at him, turned around, and walked away. He looked terrified. I didn't think about it until later. A guy you just hit on a motorcycle wearing a black helmet with a shaded visor, a black heavy thick jacket, black heavy riding pants, roadcraft jacket and pants, black thick and metal studded gloves, and black leather boots knocks on your window and points at you for being a supreme dumbass. I had no idea. I just wanted to talk to him, be a bit angry, but tell him I was okay, then take a sec to verify my bike was okay as well. Story 14. At university, we had to present our senior projects in front of the whole department. Stage fright sucks, and everyone else had a more interesting project, in my opinion. The badass moment was that my name was misprinted on the schedule and I got welcomed to the stage under the wrong name. The first thing I did was point to my real name on my presentation and say, "That's how my real name is spelled, it's just pronounced weird." A bunch of people laughed, and I got commended by a few people for adding humor to the driest 3 hours of the year. Story 15. I was the nerdy, 5 foot tall, shy girl and constantly got paired with struggling, misbehaving kids to help them. On this occasion, there were two popular guys in English class. One was your typical 2000s era comic book jock, the other was a class clown who just didn't know when to stop. Together, they unanimously agreed to do shit all, making fun of our classmates while I made the world's ugliest word cloud. I failed art class, y'all, so that's no joke. I guess I had an epiphany because for the first time in my 15 years of life, I decided, fuck this shit, and went to tell the teacher they're being lazy dickheads and I'd rather just do it solo. It took a hot minute before the jokester realized I'd even left, and when he pointed it out, the jock stood up looking ready to hulk out of his lowriders. And then the jock said, "What are you tattling on us for? It's not like we've done anything." And I replied, "Yeah, that's kind of the point." And just walked out of the silent class because I was so used to being bullied I fully expected him to throw a chair at me. But apparently, I just looked like a badass, which is accidental street cred my nerdy ass was 100% eager to roll with. Story 16. My dad has the absolute worst habit of speaking his mind and uses it as a huge excuse for just being a cunt, really. He knows his kids have been sexually assaulted and raped, but never ever would stoop so low as to take the piss out of us for it or blame us or anything, so I guess he's got that going for him. But it doesn't excuse him for comments he makes about other people. There was a news report about a woman who got raped and got into a discussion about how wearing types of clothes can be asking for it, so at that moment I come out with, "So me wearing my nightgown ready for bed when I was 5 years old was asking for it." He soon shut up. Story 17. Partly accidental. I was doing a university project and had to do a large presentation in front of maybe 50, 60 other students about possible businesses of manufacturing an educational toy for kids. It was a bit of a train wreck as no one else in the group had rehearsed or even read the script. As with all presentations, they asked for questions at the end and I stepped up to answer questions. There was one guy at the back that always asked awkward questions like, "What if someone were to injure themselves and sue you?" Or, "Have you factored in matching employees' pensions?" It was meant to be a fun project for first-year students. They weren't expecting tons of detail. When it came to asking questions, I volunteered to answer them. The guy opened right away asking awkward questions, but he misjudged how I am with details. I asked the lecturer hosting the session if I could load up my spreadsheet, and he allowed it. That's when the guy realized he had asked the wrong guy. I had made an automatic spreadsheet that would work out how many people were needed, how many machines, what hours people could work, rolling production over 24 hours, and overlapping shifts to ensure it all worked at maximum efficiency. Add to that, it worked out costs complying with the law exactly, including pension contributions, tax amounts, holidays, time off work due to illness, etc., insurance, rent, and more. When it came to asking his group questions, I asked him every single thing he had overlooked legally, like time off for work, pay increases, etc. On the way out, the other group smiled at me as if I had shut him right up. Story 18. I worked in cell phone sales for a few years, and a woman came in with a fairly new flip phone. This was 2018. We just still sold them. She was complaining because one of the sides of the screen was dangling off and said she didn't do anything. It just snapped and demanded a new phone. I told her, that looks like physical damage, and we don't have any coverage for that since you didn't buy a phone protection warranty. She insisted it wasn't physical damage and the phone just sucked and broke itself. She started freaking out and calling me all kinds of names and swinging her phone in my face, and then the top half of the phone literally snapped off and landed on the counter in front of me. I just looked her in the eyes and said, well, that was definitely physical damage. She lost her shit at my comment, and it was weirdly satisfying. Story 19. I had an older lady road rage me. Long story short, I pulled into a parallel space in front of the cop shop, and she ended me going 30. But she wasn't done. She backed out, drove up the street, turned around, and then smashed into me head-on, screeching the entire time. The officers came out in time to see her smash me a second time. I got all shaky-legged, wide-eyed, and scattered. A cop came and helped me get up the curb while another was pulling the woman out of her vehicle. She was screaming about young people being bad drivers, screaming at me for being a disrespecting millennial. I replied, ma'am, I may be a millennial, but at least I won't be in jail for child endangerment, you f***ing musty bag of skin. She didn't realize my 4-year-old was in the car. The cop busted up laughing as she was screeching about my foul language. I went in for the dirty word fatality, calling her a slimy sock, a cobwebbed old ball, whatever I could think of. The cop admonished me, but it was still chuckling. I was pretty sure this lady was purple. She was so angry. I went to her court date. She lost her license permanently, already had 10 points, had to do 80 hours of anger management and 120 hours of community service, and was credited for 3 days in jail. She was 84. Story 20. I was in an acting class in college, and we were doing a scene where a couple was having a big drawn-out fight. Multiple pairs went through the scene, and I studied it pretty hard, so I knew all the lines. We're about halfway through our performance when my partner clearly forgets what her line is, and because everyone was doing that scene, they could tell she had forgotten as well. Her next line was supposed to be, well, I'm sorry I asked. I'm not usually a quick thinker on my feet, but I just filled the second or two of awkward silence with, I bet you're sorry you asked, huh? And continued with my lines. Not overly badass per se, but the class and professor loved it and all laughed. Probably the only quick-witted thing I've ever done in my life. Story 21. I worked as a bartender at what was arguably the busiest bar in Boston, circa 2015. On a typical, overwhelmingly busy Saturday, I was working the service bar, and it was absolutely humming as it always was, making and distributing craft cocktails at breakneck speeds for servers, and also taking orders from the raving lunatics demanding to quench what seemed an insatiable thirst. It was a blur of ice and juice and madness as I crushed ice and fruit and squeezed bottles of syrups and juices and topped drinks with a myriad of garnishes, and I was in the zone. I was crushing it, achieving god-tier levels of drink making, and while doing so, I tried to take a young lady's order and she said, excuse me, you owe my friend a drink, and while I was still busy doing my thing, I asked, why? To which she replied, because you got my friend wet, residual splash, another innocent victim of war on drink tickets. And without skipping a beat, I said, yeah, her and every girl who's ever been in here, turned away, carrying on about my business, and to this day, I've yet to experience that level of overwhelming self-satisfaction in my life. She didn't even respond. She knew she had been owned. My only regret is that nobody witnessed what is quite possibly the crowning achievement of my life. Story 22. Big, burly, former Marine/mercenary from Iraq was back stateside, huge f***ing mountain of a man. We came to face each other in one of the narrow corridors of the office where one of us was gonna have to turn sideways. Neither of us turned, but we stopped. I'm 6'1", 260, and he still towered over me. He was a nice guy, but still a little conditioned, I guess you could say, or mentally unhinged. He looked at me in the eye and said, you feeling froggy? It truly was like something out of a movie. Without blinking, I replied, you better jump. We both cracked up and turned sideways while the office breathed a collective sigh of relief.